Hello everyone, welcome to this video. This video really accompanies a session I did for Teams Day Online, and in this video I want to take a closer look at the components I described during that session. The session was on Teams governance, including things like data loss prevention, information barriers, but also setting a secure or governance baseline for using Teams. So let's take a look at the components I described in this session. Okay, in the last previous videos I've talked about some specific things you need to think about for your governance plan. External access, guest access, Teams creation, team expiration. But now it's time to really look at the Teams admin dashboard, because this is the place where you will find a lot of settings which you need to have a decision on. So let's take a look at several of these, and let's start with the well, one thing you will notice within the Teams Admin Center is there is a lot of options, which makes sense because Teams is a platform. It's not just conversations or chats or documents. It's a voice platform. It's a collaborative platform, etc. So there's a lot of options. Second thing to notice is that you will see policies and settings. Please note that settings are set on a tenant level, whereas policies can be applied to either the tenant level, which by default they are, or can be assigned to specific groups within your organization, which makes sense if you really want to have specific policies for specific people. So let's take a look at several of the options. In your governance baseline, you have to really look at all these options and make a decision and configure them as you need to. So first of all, let's take a look at Teams policies. Over here we see I've got two policies. It's a very dull policy because one of the only things it does is really say, okay, can we create private channels or not? So if you want to have a group within your organization which is disallowed for using private channels, then you can do so, or you can set them off, just delete them yourselves. Okay, I'm not going to go into all the policies. I'm going to pick a couple which are very relevant. For example, meeting policies. Again, different kind of policies you can add to different kinds of groups within your organization, and these are very important because these really have an emphasis on content sharing, on your audio and video quality, but also, and there they are again, your guests. What can guests do, for example? Do you want people to start your meeting, for example, anonymous people, or do you want to have people bypass the lobby, etc.? So do you want to have a chat allowed in meetings? You might have noticed sometimes if you go to a meeting online and you discover that you cannot chat, for example, with the participants. No, that might be because this policy was enabled. Then we have meeting settings. The meeting settings I already discussed at the user level, the external user level. Here we have, for example, the anonymous users option, which I can set on and off if need be. Live events, again, policies and settings. Over here I have who can join schedule live events. Well, that's everyone within my organization, or no, I just want to have it for specific groups, for example. And I also have the live events settings, which basically has, well, some very basic settings. Then we have messaging policies, and messaging policies, again, no settings here, but really policies, and these really go in depth. For example, do you want to have owners delete, the ability to delete their messages? Do you want to have voicemails allowed? Do you want to translate messages? Well, you name it. These again are based on a policy which you can assign to a specific group. So something to really take into account for your governance baseline. Teams apps. This one is very important as well, because over here, and especially here in the permission policy, I can set which apps are allowed or disallowed for either the entire organization or for specific groups. In my case, I want to allow Microsoft apps because, well, I trust Microsoft, but I don't want any third-party apps or custom apps. If I want to make another policy for that, for a different kind of user group within my organization, then I can, for example. So this permission policy is this is definitely part of your governance plan for Teams. Okay, in the org-wide settings, well, I already covered these two in my little video on guest access, but there's other things to think about as well. Over here you see, for example, email integration. Do you want your Teams environment to be able to send and receive emails, for example? If you want to allow emails to be received by your Teams environment, then this is the option you would go for. If you want to do that on a Teams basis, then you can, but then you have to use PowerShell, for example. So this is again, normally it will be set to on. If you want to disallow it, you can set it over here. Same goes for files. Do you want your files environment simply within the channel, for example, to allow both SharePoint, which is the architecture around those files, or do you want to allow other third-party cloud solutions to be enabled? So if you don't want to, just say set it to off, for example, and save the policy. So these were a couple of settings, and in your baseline you normally would go through these settings, decide on their impact, and decide what setting you want to set off or on. If you want to use a template for that, you can, because if we go to the policy packages page, you'll see a lot of specific policies which are already out of the box available for specific user groups. For example, the first line worker. If I go over here and I go, for example, to app setup, you'll see that these are the first line worker setups. So they get activities, chat, teams, and shifts, of course. So these really are the policies for a specific first line worker. So if you want to, you can create your own baseline. If you need to or you want to, you can also use one of those pre-built setup policies. So thank you. Thank you for your attention for this video. Here are some links which might help you take your first steps for really doing your Teams governance, and I hope you will be visiting my site again. Thank you.